Back like we never left, it's your boy Johnny Vino, and today we are keeping things 100% local once again here in the Piemonte. A little while ago, we gave you a video that talked about the origins and the history of the King B Barolo here in the Piemonte. Well, you guys can't get enough of it, and neither can we. So we decided to take this to another level and get into the land, get into the dirt, get into the nitty-gritty about what makes these wines so exceptional. To do that, we're gonna need to be talking about the various crus that exist in the world of Barolo in these 11 different townships. And there could be nobody better to accompany us on this journey than Sordo Winery. So join me, Johnny Vino, on this episode of Johnny Says Something as we venture into the world of the Barolo crus. As always, guys, I like to give a little recap before we get into the video. Today, we are talking about Barolo. Barolo is a wine that is made in a very specific area, 11 townships to be specific, just southwest the town of Alba. Barolo is made with Nebbiolo grapes. Nebbiolo is a red variety that is indigenous and autochthonous to this area. It has a lot of unique characteristics. For instance, it has a very, very thin skin. On top of that, it has incredible acidity and tannins. That definitely puts it in a position to have a very, very long life. And when it comes to wine collectors and wine enthusiasts, understanding how far a wine can go and seeing that development is what we all kind of dream of. So that's what makes this wine really, really special for a lot of collectors. On top of that, it also has some interesting personality characteristics when we talk about its harvesting and how the grapes grow. It is one of the first vines that actually has its buds break, so beginning the entire flowering process. But it is one of the latest when we start talking about harvest, talking the end of October, which really is late compared to most other grapes. Here are a couple other pieces of information that you guys might find helpful too. Barolo can only be made with Nebbiolo. It must be 100% Nebbiolo. And for it to have this beautiful little stripe around it, that means it also has to go through a certain aging process. That is what makes it eventually also a true Barolo. It must spend at least 3 years aging, and 2 years of that must be spent in some type of wood vessel. Then you also have the riserva. Riserva means that it must have 2 extra years of aging. So in total, a riserva must have 5 years of aging, which the bare minimum of 3 must be done in wood. So that might help you guys read labels at another time when you're thinking about picking up a bottle. Now that we got that intro out of the way again, let's get into the wine and into the winemakers. Now, when I think of old world wineries, I'm always thinking about the people that are behind it, because in my mind, coming from a very new world type of place, there's so much importance of history and tradition and legacy. And how are they able to be reinterpreted? I think you have to look at the values that the winery was built on. And from there, you can understand how these values can become, in some sense, reinterpreted and seen from a different perspective, generation after generation. Nowadays, we are so fortunate to have the tools and the instruments that allow us to study wines and also study the vines and the land. And all of these things come together and allow us to actually make better wines, but also with a greater social conscience. All of these concepts ring true as we talk about a producer who has done something as particular as it is spectacular. We're talking about a winery that has chosen to put a spotlight on 8 individual crus in the landscape of Barolo, all the while boasting over 100 years of history itself. Yes, that is 8 crus and 100 years of history. This is a mammoth undertaking, and one that really gives us these beautiful individual glimpses of what the entire landscape of Barolo can be. Our story starts in the early 1900s when Giuseppe Sordo, the first generation, decides to start a family business in agriculture and livestock. Well, as most family businesses go, when the second generation comes around, they want to do something more. They want their own slice of the pie. Well, Giovanni Sordo decides to dive into the world of wine. Now, all of this is extremely easy to say, but very difficult to do. I think in general, we're all starting to become aware of how costly of an endeavor it can be to make wine. Plus, add that to the fact that this was a historically difficult moment for the area around Torino for various reasons. And on top of that, Nebbiolo and Barolo were not always held in such high regard. They were not always the wines that the people, especially in that area, were going to look for. But that did not stop Giovanni from taking risks and being very forward-thinking. See, as there was this exodus from the hills around Torino into the city to find secure work at the factories of Fiat, Giovanni was actually making and bottling his own wine, something that was a little bit counterintuitive at the moment. And most of that land was actually destined for Dolcetto. Yes, Dolcetto. Now, I personally love Dolcetto. I think it is very, very underappreciated, but obviously it doesn't have the same characteristics that Nebbiolo has. Well, obviously, Nebbiolo took off, Barolo boomed, and the rest is history. And then starting in 2001, the third generation, Giorgio Sordo, took over the winery. And from there, we began to see some very, very important changes in pushing them into a world that has allowed them to produce these amazing crus. Let's take a quick step back into the 1990s when the winemaking techniques at Sordo were highly influenced by the great Armando Cordero. Armando Cordero, his name echoes in the halls of Barolo lore and is a name that really any Barolo lover has definitely heard once or twice. As an external consultant for the family, he implemented some simple yet very important changes that catapulted this wine in the direction of renowned quality. This also meant coming back to Slovenian oak barrels, which Sordo now has over 100 at their disposal, and also separating the grapes immediately when they came into the cellar, depending on what piece of land they came from. Now, that may seem like an obvious thing to do, but at the time, it was not so common. Most producers were interested in crafting a wine that really presented the landscape of Barolo in its entirety, instead of putting a spotlight on unique and very interesting plots of land. Another set of practices that was quickly implemented was using the same wine technique across all Barolos. So when we talk about Sordo, that means a long submerged cap maceration from 4 weeks up to 7 weeks. And on top of that, the same size wooden vessels. Now this allows us to get a much more clear vision of what makes these wines so different. Just think, if each crew had its own winemaking style, that could be great, but it would be really difficult to try and compare them with one and another. In this way, they're all the same, so we can really begin to see what it is that the land gives us, not so much the winemaking style. So before we get into tasting these wines, let's actually take a step back and understand a little bit more about these crus. Now, cru is, I think, a word that has just kind of come into common nomenclature a little bit, but here in Italy, the specific term, the correct term is different. It is Menzioni Geografiche Aggiunte. These are added geographical indications that show and tell where the grape and the wine comes from. Now, there are 181 in total. No, I'm not tasting them today, but hopefully very soon or in my lifetime, I'll be able to check off all of these individual boxes. Now, in 1961, this is when some producers started to write these vineyards down on the bottle. But they still knew where all the best grapes were coming from. See, as we said before, it was very common for the grapes to come together and really craft an overall wine. Well, all of that word of mouth kind of got transferred to pen and paper And we began to see the first maps like the Carta del Barolo, which showed a little bit, or at least began to show, where some of these premier areas really were. We have a few of those wines today, which I'm really excited to taste and talk to you guys about. So why are we wasting any more time? Let's get into it. Now, to taste today, obviously we have our handy dandy Corvin. I would not be tasting Barolo alone without it. If you guys don't know already, this device here is absolutely fantastic, especially if you are somebody who is trying to learn more and really is interested in understanding how bottles of wine can evolve. And maybe you don't have the opportunity to open them with multiple people or buy multiple bottles. By using this device, we're able to basically pull out wine, insert inert gas, and this really, it saves the wine, and then the muscle memory from the cork closes back up as we pull it out, and I can just give myself a little bit of a taste so I don't have to waste this absolutely beautiful bottle. Obviously it would never be wasted if it was drank anyways, but you know, by yourself in a room with a bunch of lights, it ain't the best. All right, we are going to get into our first wine, which is from Mon Privato 2015. Now, Mon Privato, like Sordo, is in the township of Castiglione Faletto. This is in the heart of those 11 townships which are able to produce Barolo. Castiglione Faletto is one of the few that the entire township is actually able to produce Barolo. And an interesting thing I found out was the amount of land that has been occupied by vines has not changed really since 1929, which is very unique, because as we look at some of the other areas, the other townships around, there's definitely been much more of a boom. Castiglione Faletto, this has been let's just say, the normal, producing Nebbiolo of the highest quality. Mon Privato is also one of the premier crus, recognized by just about everybody who has worked on maps and has worked to understand the land. This area has always been recognized as a premier growing site, creating a wine that is very much unique, and that is what we're looking at. A little bit more about Mon Privato. In the last video, we talked about how there was this kind of dividing line that divided these 11 different townships in basically two main soil formations. We had the Tortonian, and then we also had the Elveziano, or the Serravallean. This, il Mon Privato, falls more on the Serravallean, but at the same time, there are some very ancient geological formations there as well. This vineyard sits just north, basically, of the actual historical center of Castiglione Faletto, and basically sits underneath a road that rides along a ridge. These vineyards underneath have beautiful south to southeast exposure to the sun. So combined beautiful sun with incredible terrain, you're gonna get a very unique wine. Already from the glass, just sitting here, which by the way, thank you very much to Italesse for these beautiful glasses that really give us an instrument to get the most out of this wine. You're already getting these very first red fruit notes, the cherries, the raspberries just jumping out. It has this beautiful, in some sense, traditionally garnet color, beautiful ruby of Barolo. It has a little bit of that brick around the edges that everybody falls in love with. You know, that is one of the really noteworthy characteristics of Barolo in general, and Nebbiolo having this very thin skin. It doesn't have this super intense, deep color that many people often, I think, associate with wine. So this wine is already doing something that is a little bit different for some people if you don't know maybe what you're looking for. And you can see these big kind of church window legs, as they call them, basically also giving you an idea about the alcohol. I think, yeah, 14.5%. So there's definitely some alcohol content in here as well. Wow. You could just get lost in that, and I think that's one of the difficulties, and also one of the things you can really enjoy about the complexity of Barolo. If you want to sit there and try and pick every little thing out, you can close your eyes and go at it for days. But there are some times where maybe you just want to sit back and enjoy its complexity, enjoy its uniqueness, and however you do it, I think that's. Again, you're getting these beautiful cherry, red fruit, raspberry notes. There's almost a buttery quality about it. There's a softness there, but also a really, really nice crispness to this fruit. They're ripe, they're mature, but they're right there on that line. They're not overly mature by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, this is a 2015, so there's still a lot of freshness in this. There are some also really, I kind of just wanted to let this sit in the glass for a second. There's some beautiful floral notes in this as well. This wine is so nuanced that I truly feel bad just kind of sipping it, tasting it, and hopping to another. Though I'm very interested to see how these wines change and how they change from place to place. This wine right here, again, there's so many different layers. You get so many spices now, a really sweet spice, almost a sort of resin that is coming out of the glass. All of these things also develop and evolve over time in a way that is absolutely fantastic. That is why Barolo is known and has this tendency to be viewed as a wine that you can only drink after an extended period of time. Obviously, this wine right here, 2015, it's already got 5 years, but it's coming from that side, let's say, that Serrabalean soil, that Helvetiano soil, that really typically most people see it as it needs a little bit more time. I can see why, I can understand, but that doesn't take anything away from the beauty that this is showing in the glass right now. It is already so nuanced, and you know that those nuances are going to evolve so much going forward. Now, here we are going to Monvigliero. And in Monvigliero, we are getting out of what we may consider to be the heart of Barolo, heart in terms of geographical location. This was in Castiglione Faletto, as we said before, which is right in the center of these 11 townships. Here in Monvigliero, this is the quote-unquote Grand Cru of Verduno. So we are going into the more northern part of where Barolo can be made, but this wine has shown over time that it deserves all of the notoriety that it receives. So again, we are talking about Monvigliero in the township of Verduno. Sordo started producing this wine in 2005. This wine right here comes from vines that are around 35 years old, and the elevation is about 270 meters above sea level. This wine falls into that category of coming from soils of the Tortonian age. Now, Tortonian typically is known to evolve a little bit faster, be ready a little bit faster. That's probably a better way of saying it. And here we're talking a lot about aromatics. This area also can be known because the soil is a little bit more sandy. It creates a little bit more vine stress when warmer temperatures come in the summer. Now that may translate into a slightly lighter color, but more ample aromatics. So again, all of these little things, all of these little characteristics that really put this wine in a very special place. Again, all of these notes are extremely captivating. Here you're getting a lot of that dried floral, a little bit of that crushed rose petal note. You're still getting those trademark cherries, red fruit, but here the spices are coming even a little bit more pronounced and giving you even just a little bit of that touch of that forest floor, maybe a little bit of tobacco. But again, just doing a quick comparison. We're talking about two, I hate to use the word different wines because obviously there's so much that is similar about them, but we're talking about wines with very distinct characteristics. Wow, really elegant tannins here. A little bit more subtle than the first one, which is something that we can also expect. Here, once again, very, very well balanced, but it is a little bit less of a bodied wine. So if this was full body, this is maybe medium plus, which is not a bad thing at all, guys. This wine right here, you're starting to get a little bit of that kind of like licoricey little note there at the end. What a beautiful nuanced wine. And I think that's the thing that we're always going to come back to and talk about when we talk about Barolo is nuanced and unique. And I'm okay with that. The tannins here are much more silky than in the other one, as we use the word chalky, just because it kind of felt like it left over almost like this powdery feeling on your gums. Here, this is silky smooth. This is coming in and out. It's again, very distinct wines, have a lot in common, but again, very, very distinct. The more we leave these wines in the glass as well, the more these aromas are really, really opening up. And it's really, really excited to see. I can't sit here with you guys for the next 2 hours, but know that I will. There's also something very savory about this wine compared to this one. Even though that there was a sort of minerality in the Monprivato, this is even more savory, even a little bit more herby, if you will. And that's where that anise, a little bit of that licorice really comes into play. All right, so the original video was only supposed to have 2 wines, but my good friends were kind enough to save me a little bit of some wines that they had already tasted from Sordo. And so y'all get a little bit of a bonus footage too. We have 2 more wines. So in total, we'll be tasting 4 of the 8 crus, which I will give you the full list here in a little bit. So before we did Monprivato from Castiglione Faletto, then we did Monvigliero from Verduno, and now we are going to go to Rocche di Castiglione. This is another premier cru site in Castiglione Faletto. It's actually not too far from Monprivato, but again, because of the way the erosion of the land and how that has worked over time, we're talking about wines that are extremely distinct. Again, Rocche di Castiglione 2015. This right here, in terms of vineyards, is one of my favorite visually. Again, it kind of sits right under this road that rides along a ridgeline, but right underneath is this steep valley. There is a cliff, basically, a drop off that drops into, I'm not gonna say nothingness, but it drops into one of the valleys there in Castiglione Faletto. It is absolutely breathtaking to see, and it's one of those places that really evokes an emotion when you see it, and then you have the opportunity to taste the wine, and everything really comes full circle. Once again, thanks to Coravin, I'm able to taste a number of wines, keep the rest, and these bottles will age for forever. These can stay 10, 15 years, absolutely no problem. There's inert gas inside. There's no oxidation, if any at all. And again, these corks have a muscle memory to where they close right back up. And that's the beauty of a device like this. I can taste these wines again. I can taste them when I'm comparing other winemakers, other areas, other crus, and this all is going to help me, if you're a wine lover, give you much better perspective. And so if you taste wine, whether you're on your own or with some friends, I don't think I could highly suggest another tool as much as I suggest Coravin. All right, back to doing what we love the most. So, Rocche di Castiglione. Wow. Already seems like quite a difference in color. This color already seems a bit darker to me. Wow. That fruit, that aromatics, it is, in Italian, I think it would say a polposo. There seems something very pulpy about this. There's a richness to it, and I'm gonna have to sit here with this one for a second. I should say all of these wines are very much expressive in their own right, and when it comes to perfumes, we are definitely talking about different layers of this. Here in the one from Monvigliero, we're maybe talking about something that was a little bit more spiced, a little bit, you know, sweetly spiced, let's say, while here we are talking about a richness of really red fruit that is just absolutely fantastic. And again, it continues to develop in the glass, and that's why sometimes I'm a little bit hesitant to sip so quickly, because I really want to see how far this wine can come while it's just sitting there in the glass for a little bit. And again, we're about 320 to 350 meters above sea level, so a nice altitude, nothing extravagant, let's say, but nice, giving us that right amount, let's say, of coolness, of altitude that will eventually, you know, play its part when we start talking about also the exposure, which here we're talking a little south-southwest, and so we're really going to get that sun all day long into the sunset. Oh wow, so different from the one before, so distinct. Again, balanced, the acidity here, the tannins once again. I would go, this one's a little bit closer to in Monprivato rather than Monvigliero when we start to talk about tannins. Still balanced. This one could age, but at the same time, there's an overall softness, and I mean that in terms of the palate, probably of the mixture between alcohol, acidity, and tannins, that really allows for this to be drank even at this stage, it being a 2015. This is an exceptional wine. All right, guys, for my last and final wine, if you remember at the very beginning of this video, which may seem like a long time ago, I talked about the Riserva, and Riserva having different rules, let's say, different regulations for what would be necessary to put Riserva on the label. They need a total of 5 years of aging, where at least three are done in wooden vessels. Now, I have a wonderful surprise for myself and for you. I'm going to be tasting a 2004 Riserva, and in doing so, I'm also going to use a nice little tool from Corvin, which is an aerator, and it's very easy to use. All you got to do is just put that right on the end, just like so, and there you go. Now, what an aerator does, if you're not familiar with, is it basically, and you'll see when I put the wine in the glass, it opens it up and it sprays it almost like a shower head. So it's putting as much contact with the air as possible with the wine. And this is going to allow it, you know, that classic phrase, open up. It's going to allow the wine to breathe a little bit easier and make it a little bit more ready to drink immediately. The other way of doing this is using a decanter, but if you use a decanter, you typically have to wait an extended period of time. This does the same job, but like that. All right, this was what I was talking about. 2004 Perno. Perno is one of the larger crus, and it's actually divided into 3 areas. The area that Sordo has its vineyards is called Cerreto, and this is one of the first areas, let's say, when you are coming from Alba, that you would see. They have an extremely steep single vineyard. It is one of the longest that there are, longest in terms of length, in terms of slope. If you ever have the chance, there's plenty of incredible resources, digital maps, 3D maps. If you're not an old school person and you just want a book, there are incredible resources when it comes to understanding more about the crus of Barolo. Now, this is a 2004. Last time I checked, we're still in 2020. But again, guys, this is a 2004. We're talking about 16 years ago. This wine will definitely have evolved. We're going to get some of those evolved notes, probably that we didn't get in the earlier wines, where those were still quite fresh. Again, the characteristics of Nebbiolo that allow these wines to age so much, it is the acidity and it is the tannins, and both of those things come into play, especially with a wine like this. And as we can see here, oh yes, that shower, that beautiful, beautiful shower. And you can even see the colors is, here we're getting into that brick. Here we're getting into that brick that everybody loves. Oh, wow. Jeez Louise, as we like to say. Yes, you're getting into that brick. That color has become concentrated in the center, while on the outside, it has that light brown brick look to it. This nose is light years different from what I had smelled before, and this again has everything to do with the age. Now, this does come from a different township. This is from Monforte d'Alba. We're still there on the Serravaleian Helveziano geological formation, but that does also lend itself a little bit more to the aging process. All right, guys, we can tell from the color just the depth of this wine in terms of its evolution. Here, the colors were much brighter in all of these three wines, 2015s, much brighter, much more, in Italian we'd say accesi, kind of turned on. Here, we're getting into that beautiful brick that I think most people really know Barolo for. Wine collectors, people who allow their wines to age. This is really what they're looking for. You're getting in that outer edge that has that beautiful light brick tone to it. And on the nose, again, this is that earthiness. This is that kind of that forest, that evolution of a forest floor, balsamic notes even, and with just that beautiful touch of graphite. There's also a little bit of cocoa in there, and that all really comes together to do something spectacular. Wow. This right here is special. I do not take this for granted, guys. For anybody who thinks that this will ever become normal to me, I promise you, as a young man from Indiana, this is always something that I pinch myself doing. This 2004 Perno Cru Barolo is something special. And here you can understand why people love their wines to age. These tannins have become so soft, so enjoyable, so cloud-like, still very present, and it's that acidity that is still alive that continues to make you salivate. This right here with a beautiful braised piece of beef, even using a Barolo to braise it as we would here in the region, would be absolutely fantastic. This is I'm not gonna go so, this is an experience. This is a wine that is to be experienced. All right, huge thank you once again to Sordo for allowing us to taste these 4 of their 8 individual crus that they hand select and carefully craft. Again, Mon Privato and Rocco di Castiglione come from Castiglione Faletto. Monvigliero is in the northern township of Verduno. Perno is in Monforte d'Alba. They have 4 other crus available as well. Villero, which is Castiglione Faletto. Parussi, which is Castiglione Faletto. Then you have Ravera, which is in Novello, which is another great vineyard site. And on top of that, Gabutti, which is in Serralunga d'Alba. So with all 8 of these, you really get an incredible and unique image of what Barolo can be, how fantastic Nebbiolo as a grape is, and overall just the love and passion for an entire territory. So thank you once again to Sordo. Thank you once again to Corvin for allowing me not to open all of these bottles. And thank you to Italesse for giving us glasses that truly allow us to taste and do our best in understanding what these wines have to offer. These are all tools and instruments that make a wine lover's life easier and frankly better. So I'm signing off. Until next time, Johnny Vino, say something.